Welcome back to my channel. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about ChatGPT and one of the latest features in the GPT-4 model, which is plugins. And also later in this video, we're going to have a look at one of my attempts to build a plugin for ChatGPT. So I guess a number of us watching this video are familiar with what ChatGPT is, and we'll use it quite regularly. Well, I personally use it quite regularly. So essentially, it's just a conversational AI model. And what that means is that it's something you can have a conversation with. You can give it prompts in the form of text, and it would reply you back in text. But like, it's really uncanny how human-like the text responses are, and it's quite incredible because really it's a really clever piece of technology that you can use to do a lot of things. You can use it to be more productive in your daily life, and if anything, I kind of use it as a substitute to Google, because I could ask it questions. I could even ask it to do like really creative tasks. Like, for example, if I say write a 5-line poem on cheese, right, it would give me something back. Like in a matter of seconds. It's really, really amazing. But despite the wonderful features of ChatGPT, it does have some shortcomings. One in particular is that it can't give real-time data or real-time updates. Yeah, it can't give real-time updates. So I'm just going to demonstrate that. For example, if I say, what is the latest news in Manchester, for example. If I ask it that, it would tell me that it doesn't have real-time capabilities or access to current events. And because like the model was trained on data up to September 2021, so that's the latest bit of information that it can provide. So you can see that that's a shortcoming that ChatGPT has. And there are others as well. Like, for example, if you ask a question that's too specific beyond the realms of what the model has been trained on, it also wouldn't be able to answer those questions. Maybe, for example, like if you're doing like really complex calculus, it wouldn't be able to answer that. So the question is, how do you get around that shortcoming? Like, for example, let's take the use case of real-time data. Like, how would I want to know, like, for example, the latest news in Manchester? Or I would go on Google and type in Google, what is the latest news in Manchester? And what Google would do is that it would return the latest news. And how it does that is pretty much going to give us an insight into how we can solve this problem in ChatGPT. Because Google is essentially a web application that talks to other web applications using APIs. So essentially, Google was able to get that data, or is able to get that data, by calling APIs. So what if we can teach ChatGPT to call APIs to get certain information? And that's essentially the idea behind plugins. So what plugins are is an API along with instructions for ChatGPT on how to use those APIs based on the prompts that we give it. So I'm just going to demonstrate that. For example, I hope I'm not taking too much time. I'll try and be quick. So I'll click on plugins. Okay, I already have one installed, the Speak plugin. But there's a plugin store, and there's a bunch of plugins already verified by OpenAPI. I'm just going to see, okay, world news. So I'm going to install that. Okay, installed. As you can see, now I have 2 plugins installed. So the prompt that I asked earlier, which was what is the latest news in Manchester, I'm just going to try that again here. And you would notice, or I would assume, that it's going to, use the world news plugin to figure that out. And now, as you can see, with the power of this of a GPT plugin, that limitation or that shortcoming of not being able to have access to real-time updates has been solved. And it's really cool because this plugins that not the plugins can contribute to improving the language model without actually having to retrain it. So very cool innovation there by OpenAI. So yeah, it's still going. I guess there's a bunch that happened today in Manchester. But yeah, I pretty much demonstrated um, how plugins work, and I've given you some insights into what they are. And so having an insight into what it is also allows us to know how to build one alongside the documentation provided here by OpenAI. So like it says, or like I've said before, it involves an API and some instructions. So if you look at the documentation, the first step is to build an API. So I would assume that the World News plugin has an API that is able to fetch the latest news from some kind of data source. So I have decided to not necessarily build an API. In my approach, I'm just leveraging on an API that's already been built. So I decided to build a plugin for searching GitHub repositories. And so pretty much the API I built is just a reverse proxy that forwards the requests to the APIs provided by GitHub to search repositories, because they already have that. So if I go to GitHub here, GitHub REST APIs, I have a lot of REST APIs for different things. We're interested in the search. So if I scroll down to search here, you can see it's this is the REST API to search for a specific item you want to find. Like if you want to find a user or a specific file in a repository, you can use the GitHub API to do that. But so I just thought, what if I want to do that from ChatGPT? Like for example, it should help me find the repository of this user, or a project or a project of or a particular kind of project, for example, or like the most popular, or the latest projects, the latest projects on GitHub. You know, I could pass those prompts on ChatGPT using this plugin, and I'll be able to get that information. So that's just what I thought. So that's essentially the plugin I'm building. So for the API parts, I'm just leveraging GitHub's API. And how I'm doing that, like I mentioned earlier, is just a reverse proxy. So any call made to my API is just forwarded to the search API for GitHub. So, but the most important parts of making a plugin are the instructions in quotes, which come in the form of an open API specification and a JSON manifest or a plugin manifest. So if you scroll down here, you can see that every plugin requires this particular JSON file, which represents the manifest. And the manifest has a bunch of information, has the schema version, the name of the plugin for the human, the name of the plugin for the model, the description, whether or not authentication is required, the type of API specification, which is OpenAPI, the link to that specification, the logo, and so on. There's like a bunch of different fields provided, so you can see the required ones, which are these. Then there's like a bunch of optional ones as well. So this particular plugin manifest must be accessible from your domain. Once you put, like, for example, if it's example.com, it must be accessible at example.com slash dot wellknown slash dot AI plugin.json. So I have my own manifests here. So you can see I have a public folder which I am serving as a static, which I'm using to serve my static files. So my static files will contain like my manifest and also my open API specification. So I have it in the /wellknown directory. We can see it here. So this is the name, GitHub Repositories Search API, the description, the URL. I've been able to host it on Vercel, so you can have a look as well if you're interested. And the logo, my email address, and just a dummy site for the legal information. So this is the manifest. That's one part of the instructions and quotes. And the second is the Open API specification, which is just a YAML file. And this is arguably the most important of the things that you need, because it pretty much describes how your API works. And this is what ChatGPT is going to kind of use to understand how it works and how to call it and what he expects and so on and so forth. So given that, I'm pretty much just interfacing the GitHub API. I more or less just copied a section from their own Open API specifications. You can find that on their GitHub repo, but this is the link right here. It's quite large because, you know, like I said, the GitHub API has a bunch of REST APIs that you can call, and I'm only interested in the search, so I just copied the search aspect of it. So we can see to search code, to search commits. Let me just minimize them. To search code, to search commits, to search issues, to search labels, to search repositories, to search topics, to search users, and the components, which I just copied the whole component section because it was quite the hassle to pick the exact ones that I needed. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. So once you have your API, this is my API. Like I said, just a reverse proxy. You call this endpoint /API, proxies it to the GitHub API. I'll just demonstrate that, for example. So if this is the GitHub API, api.github.com. So if I go to it, this is what I see. If I go to my own API that I've hosted, GPT plugin, yeah, so you can see that I'm proxying on /API. So if I say /API, just proxies to that. So if I try to use the search, let's say search users, let's say, let's use mine for example. Yeah, you can see there's two repositories that kind of have the username Dr. Drake, but this one is mine and this is someone else's. I can do the same thing here, just have to copy this. Yeah, essentially. So this is pretty much the API that I've built or leveraged on, and I have my manifest and I have my open API specification. So this is pretty much all I need to build a plugin. Then to install it, which is something we're not able to do at the moment, because, so like if you read this section, running a plugin, so once you've created the API, the manifest file, and the specification, you're now ready to connect your plugin. So you can connect it in two different places. You can either run it locally or on a remote server. So I have mine on a remote server. So it says that if mine is running on a remote server, I need to first select develop your own plugin to set it up, and then install an unverified plugin. So this is how I'll be able to run and debug to see if it works. Unfortunately, I don't have access to that yet. Like, I'm going to show you what I mean. So let me just open a new chat. So if I go to the plugin store, there's supposed to be an option here that says develop your own plugin. And the reason I don't have access to that is because I have to join a waiting list for to be a developer or to be able to develop plugins. So you can see I need to join the plugin waitlist, which I already did. So pending when that happens, I'll be able to actually run the plugin that I just made and to see if it works. So yeah, this was a long video. Sorry to take up so much time, but I hope like it was educational and useful to some level. And we'll probably see in another video where hopefully I'll be able to run this plugin that I made. You can check out the link in this video to see the repository and also to have access to the plugin URL in case you're curious. Yeah. All right. Thank you.